left and she was shutting the door, she said, "Bye, Mom, love you." And that was the last time I talked to my daughter.
She was like, "He tried to rape me, he tried to rape me. Do you see these scratches?" She lifted up her shorts, showing me her inner thigh scratches.
And I got a call from our press officer, and she asked me if I had heard about a second girl having gone missing in Oregon City.
It felt like the earth opened. They were gone. It was just like they both just disappeared.
Oregon City, Oregon lies less than 20 miles southeast of Portland, near the scenic Willamette Falls. Roughly 28,000 people live within its limits. But for nearly a year, just one will hold the entire city hostage, testing the FBI and local law enforcement in ways they've never been tested before. January 9th, 2002 begins like any other day for the children of the Newell Creek Village apartment complex as they make their way to the bus stop for school. But 12-year-old junior high student Ashley Pond is not among them.
She was running a little late that morning. And before she left and she was shutting the door, she said, "Bye, Mom, love you." And that was the last time I talked to my daughter.
When Ashley isn't home by nightfall, her mother begins to worry.
I pulled out the numbers for all her friends,
And she usually goes to the
and I
dance
started making
practice.
phone calls saying, have you seen Ashley? Was she at school?
She never showed up.
But no one has seen or heard from Ashley all day. Lori Pond's next call is to her daughter's dance instructor, Sharonda Bowen, who is also a family friend.
We were getting ready for a competition. So we were pretty much practicing every night after school. Ashley's mom asked if we had seen her and if she was at practice. And I said no, I hadn't seen her. So I asked the girls that were there in the office and stuff if they'd seen her, and they said no, she wasn't at school.
It now appears that somewhere on the 10-minute walk from her front door to the bus stop, in broad daylight, Ashley Pond simply vanished. Growing more desperate by the moment, Lori Pond finally breaks down and calls 911.
911, what's location of your emergency?
Is this an adult or a child? A child. Is this your daughter or son? My daughter. How old is she? She's 12. Okay, you don't think she'd ever run away? No, I don't. How long has she been missing? She's been missing since this morning.
They asked me, what makes you think something happened to her? And I said, because my daughter would call. She would notify me and let me know, Mom, I'm gonna be a few minutes late. So I wouldn't worry.
She may have gone to visit.
When you have a troubled 12-year-old girl, there are a lot of possibilities, and most likely scenarios are that she's safe and just with friends, or maybe with another relative or an ex-boyfriend, who knows. As police officers, we take so many runaway reports throughout our careers, and more than 99% of the time, the child is safe.
But Ashley's mother remains unconvinced.
My daughter didn't take anything out of the ordinary with her. She didn't pack any clothes. Her makeup was still at home. Being almost 13, those are things they're gonna take, And nothing out of the ordinary was missing out of her room.
Police are skeptical, but because of Ashley's young age, they pursue the case. One thing they do know, if Ashley was in fact abducted, the likelihood of finding her alive is diminishing, and fast.
If they're not found within those first few hours, especially the first 24 hours, that really changes the game. It's critical that they are located within those first few hours.
As a first step, police interview Lori Pond and her current boyfriend, James Kitely. They both seem helpful and genuinely concerned about Ashley. But when Lori is asked if she knows of anyone who might want to harm her daughter, she informs investigators that Ashley and her biological father have had a tumultuous relationship.
One of the early rumors I heard is that Ashley Pond's father, Wesley Roediger, had actually been convicted of molesting her.
The charges are reduced to 1 count of attempted sexual molestation when he pleads no contest, and Rutger is sentenced to 11 months probation. He's also a registered sex offender, and contact with his family is restricted.
And I heard that he was very upset about this and had actually threatened Ashley's life.
Adding to suspicions is the fact that at the time of Ashley's disappearance, Rutger was living less than 20 miles away.
One of the first people I set out to find was him, to ask him if this was true, if he had, threatened his daughter. Roediger lived in a trailer park, and as I started to walk down towards the trailer, he ran out the back door.
Police eventually track Rutger down, but when his alibi checks out, he is dropped as a person of interest.
We do this routinely in these kinds of cases. Try to identify people in close proximity to the victim, either because they're family or relatives or because of where they live, to try to rule them out so that we can get on to something that's more productive.
Mrs. Pond also tells police about Ward Weaver, a 38-year-old single father who lives up the street near the bus stop and whose daughter is a friend of Ashley's.
Ward's house was the hangout place. People did go up there to get away from their problems at home.
But like Ashley's father, Weaver also provides police with an alibi.
He was very cooperative, provided his alibi for where he would have been on the morning that Ashley disappeared. Records indicated that he had been at work that morning.
In the days that follow, investigators canvass the area around Ashley's apartment looking for anything that might shed light on her disappearance.
We were getting conflicting stories.
The moment she told me she saw her.
Some said, oh, I think I might have seen her, or this or that.
The mall.
So that kind of makes it hard.
24 hours pass, then 48, then 72. But 9 days later, when there's still no sign of Ashley, parents all over the city begin to take notice.
There was a tremendous amount of fear, especially for parents with adolescent children. I hope my child isn't next.
Obviously, everybody's shaken up when something like this happens.
Because of the time that had elapsed, with no real verifiable sighting of her, they decided that it might be something more than. That's when they called and asked for some assistance.
The FBI's Portland field office is quick to spring into action.
We come into a case assuming that it's been a child abduction, because if you don't start off that way, you're starting off behind the 8 ball.
But like local authorities, the feds hit the ground with very little to go on.
With no crime scene, with no positive sightings, no suggestion that anything bad had happened to Ashley, it's difficult to find a starting point.
We did searches, we did neighborhood canvass, and we interviewed a lot of people. As soon as, she exits her front door, nobody can say what happened to her.
And with each passing day, things get a little bleaker for the family.
It was like a roller coaster, really. You're trying to think positive, but always these horrible thoughts creep into your mind, and you try to push them away.
2 months go by with no break in the case. Then, on March 8th, A call comes in to the FBI office in Portland that stops the investigation in its tracks.
I happened to be out to dinner with my wife that evening. I was driving home around 10 o'clock, and I got a call from our press officer, and she asked me if I had heard about a second girl having gone missing in Oregon City.
What's your daughter's name?
Miranda Gaddis.
How long has she been gone?
I left for work this morning, and she leaves after I do for the bus. And she never showed up for school. No one saw her, nothing.
What's your home address?
14155 South Beaver Creek Road, the same as Ashley Pond.
Federal and local authorities have been investigating the disappearance of 12-year-old Ashley Pond for 2 months, with no success. But when 13-year-old Miranda Gaddis goes missing, under the exact same circumstances, authorities and residents alike are shaken to the core.
I remained out there that evening along with the 2 agents to try to gather information from family members and people that might have seen Miranda that day. It became real apparent to me that we had a real problem here at this complex.
For Miranda Gaddis, the discovery comes as a double blow. A close friend of Ashley's, the last 2 months have been an emotional roller coaster, and now her own sister has also vanished.
I got a call from my mom stating that she hadn't showed up for school or for dance practice. That right there just kind of gave me a feeling that something was wrong. I broke down crying.
It felt like the earth opened. They were gone. It was just like they both just disappeared.
I was shocked. I was already kind of in a panic inside. Like, okay, now it has to be the same person. The same person that took my daughter has now taken Miranda.
Investigators can't ignore the eerie similarities either. Both girls live in the same housing complex, and both vanish on their way to school in broad daylight.
When Miranda disappears, we now know that, we have a predator that we're dealing with. We took steps to try and prevent anything else from happening by having a presence out there on a daily basis. We had some other investigative techniques that we use that I'm not going to elaborate on, that were put into place as a preventative measure in the event that something else happened in that apartment complex, in that neighborhood.
Investigators' next step is to piece together a timeline of events leading up to Miranda's disappearance. Unfortunately, information is spotty. The only thing that Mariah can remember about that morning was that she and her sister Miranda had an argument.
The last conversation I had with Miranda that morning that she disappeared,
Hey Miranda, can I borrow your sweater?
it wasn't a good conversation.
What? I always let you borrow
Her and I
my
got into a
sweater.
huge fight.
This is unfair.
I had cussed her out. She cussed me out, and I slammed her door. It was very confusing, and it was very hard, not having her there.
With the clock ticking, authorities establish a command center in the local firehouse to expedite the flow of information. Because both girls live in the same apartment complex, investigators renew their search of the area, but it's not an easy task.
It sits down a hill and sort of surrounded by a pretty intensely wooded area. And then there's actually a canyon behind it.
There were a lot of escape routes that would be very difficult to follow because of the uneven terrain, wet, muddy conditions, especially the time of year that this took place. It was January and then March, a year into a lot of rain, a lot of running water.
For Ashley's mom, all the searching gives rise to her worst fears.
I didn't go on any of the searches. I was afraid that maybe she was no longer with us. And that's the last thing I wanted to do, is walk upon my daughter's dead body.
The hope is always that you're going to find these girls alive. But there is some part of us as law enforcement officers that realize, as the days go on, our chances of finding them alive are not good.
While canine units scour the woods and fields across the county, investigators study the girls' histories, what police call a victimology. And once again, it's difficult to ignore the similarities in the girls' lives. Like Ashley's dad, Miranda's father also had a brush with the law.
He had gone to jail on a sex offense. This is not, typical family behavior.
Jason Richard Gaddis was found guilty of sex crimes against a minor in 1995. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison and 54 years post-release supervision. He is living nearby when Ashley Pond disappears and in jail when his own daughter, Miranda, goes missing. But after a thorough investigation, authorities can find no evidence linking Gaddis to either incident.
He was just one of many potentially dangerous people that had access to these children.
And while Gaddis is eventually cleared of any involvement, police have no shortage of possible persons of interest.
The person of interest board was essentially a whiteboard and grease markers, and it was ever-changing, ever-revolving. It was a pretty long list.
Bottom line, the girls lived near each other and both vanished with little evidence of a struggle. 2 clues that suggest to police they were likely abducted by someone they knew. A neighbor, a relative, a friend.
They had investigated my past because I was in and out of foster homes and knew that I had this open door policy, and both Miranda and Ashley had had a troubled life, so they assumed that I had taken them and hidden them somewhere. And that was kind of tough to deal with.
Whenever a tip would come in, anything that we could follow up on, we did. We left no stone unturned. We were getting, again, approximately 800 or so a month to 1,000.
But as the list of suspects grows larger and larger, investigators begin to notice an unusual and disturbing trend.
The apartment complex was littered with people that had, criminal histories, people that had fantasized about, young girls.
There are also an astonishing number of registered sex offenders living in the area around the Newell Creek complex. It is what investigators call a suspect-rich environment.
An agent came up to me, an agent that I respect a lot, and he came up to me and he says, "Scott," he says, "I've interviewed 23 people in that complex today, and you can't eliminate any of them as being a suspect."
The FBI's Child Abduction and Serial Murder Investigative Resources Center, or CASMERC, was formed in 1998 to assist authorities investigating child abductions and homicides across the country. Bureau personnel help identify and track serial offenders in an effort to match them to unsolved cases. When 12-year-old Ashley Pond first vanishes from an Oregon City housing complex, police consider that she could be a runaway. But the disappearance of 13-year-old Miranda Gaddis 2 months later alerts authorities to an ominous reality. There is likely a predator in their midst, and he's targeting young girls.
We have seen children returned years, decades after they've gone missing. So for those that work those cases on a daily basis, it never diminishes. Frustration comes in, but hope never diminishes.
At their makeshift command center, the FBI and local police begin a daunting task, processing some 4,000 leads.
We kept thinking to ourselves, there have got to be people here that we're missing. There has to be somebody that we haven't been able to contact.
Investigators soon zero in on another person of interest, a man named Johnny Vieger.
There was this guy in the apartment complex. Single father, his daughter was really young. He was a suspect at the time. I was told he was the prime suspect. He had asked to take Miranda and Ashley to a big party spot, pretty much. This was before the girls went missing. He had a record for sexual assault, and he just happened to be out of town when Ashley was missing, and same for Miranda. And the police saw that this guy, was a red flag.
Investigators question Vieger, and though he's defensive, they're unable to turn up any evidence linking him to the missing girls.
Made him so furious, and he was so upset. I couldn't imagine what that's like, being told I'm the suspect, But it's got to be hard, but they do have to rule out.
It isn't long, though, before investigators are hot on the trail of another pair of suspects.
We had identified a couple of people in the complex. We had been told, had said some curious things about the disappearance of the girls. We had some surveillance on them. And we actually observed them try to grab someone off the street in a manner which appeared they were up to no good. Because we had close observation on them, we were able to sort of intercept that little activity and sort of ended before it got started. But that behavior had us looking at this person closely, obviously. We asked for permission to look through their place, just to give us a comfort level that nothing was in there that would be useful to us during the course of the investigation.
But inside the apartment, investigators find nothing to suggest they were involved in either girl's disappearance.
There were many people who readily gave us that consent. Some, for various reasons, chose not to. There were occasions where we actually developed sufficient evidence to obtain search warrants to get into some of the places, but none of those were fruitful.
Keeping that scrutiny intense was a key. You have to put a little pressure on people to share information. Not everybody is going to be forthcoming, especially when they're speaking with a detective and an FBI agent.
And some seem more comfortable speaking to the press. One resident calls reporter Jim Redden with a tip about a dominatrix named Sheila Gordon, who was living in the same apartment complex as Ashley and Miranda.
I thought, well, here's a person that could have easily attracted, some bad people to the apartment complex who could have, after a visit there, done something to children in the area.
But when he locates Gordon, she's no longer living in Oregon City. She admits to being a dominatrix, but insists she entertained all of her clients at a downtown Portland location, far away from the suspected crime scenes. The lead, like so many others, turns out to be another dead end.
The challenges with this case, they're just too numerous to count. When you have no firsthand witness to describe an actual abduction, no known location of a crime scene, you have two missing young girls who you just don't know if they're alive. You could be working a homicide, but you don't know if you are because you hope that they're still alive and that they're safe. And it's a difficult kind of case to work when you really don't know what you have.
Every time you come up with a new lead or a new suspect, you start a critical clock again.
These flyers.
There's common sense, there's statistics, but there's always hope.
As police and the press continue to track down persons of interest, many community residents decide to take action on their own. Residents like Billy Crabtree.
Billy Crabtree was one of a number of people that kind of stepped up early on to help organize searches in the wooded area around the apartment complex to see if they could find any evidence of the girls having gone missing. I think he started like a nonprofit organization, raised some money for this.
But Crabtree's interest in the case soon raises some eyebrows.
He was leading some kind of a search crew somewhere, and they actually found, I believe it was a human skull, in the woods near the apartment complex. And it didn't belong to either of the girls. I'm not sure who it belonged to.
Crabtree's familiarity with both families also draws the attention of investigators.
It's highly more likely for a child to be abducted by a family member or someone in the family circle than it is a total stranger. These things do happen, but it's in the minority when it's a total stranger.
I know that the police and the FBI really did look into his background once he came forward. I didn't myself, I think another reporter at the paper did, and we didn't find anything that indicated he had that kind of criminal background or anything, but he did just strike us as an odd duck.
Eventually, Crabtree takes a polygraph test and is eliminated as a person of interest in the case. But it isn't long before an old suspect resurfaces.
He was a grandpa to everybody because he was older. His house was kind of the place to be. And he was really nice, and at times he was creepy. You know, the little things he would do, you know, watching you brush your hair, or, you know, watching you walk into the bedroom or to the bathroom.
Weeks after the disappearance of Ashley Pond and Miranda Gaddis, police home in on a suspect named Ward Weaver. Although Weaver's alibi appeared to check out early on in the investigation, his recent behavior has been sending shockwaves through the close-knit community.
Told him I wanted to talk to him about the two girls that had disappeared. And then he said, well, can I tell you something off the record? And I said, sure. And he said, I'm the FBI's prime suspect, just like that. I didn't expect that.
That actually caught a lot of us off guard. And then he starts giving interviews, you know, with media and getting kind of wrapped up in that attention.
When somebody does that, obviously it may mean that they doth protest too much, and maybe they should be considered a suspect, and in their own inane way, they're saying, look at me, but I can't say I did it.
We thought he was an idiot. You know, it's just like he's, you know, was questioned just like everybody else was questioned. He's just trying to make this all about him.
We re-interviewed Mr. Weaver. We also asked Mr. Weaver to take a polygraph examination. We asked a number of people to take polygraph examinations during the course of this investigation, but he was one of them. He agreed and did not do well on the polygraph.
And Weaver fits another piece of the FBI profile in that his daughter, Mallory, is friends with both girls.
Ward's house was the hangout place. People did go up there, you know, to get away from their problems at home. He used to drive us to youth group all the time. He would take us to Dairy Queen before and or after. You know, we missed the school bus, he would take us to school. He was just, you know, a nice person in general.
Both the girls' families were acquainted with him. They were friendly with Mr. Weaver. Ashley had actually lived at Mr. Weaver's house for a period of time one summer.
But of most interest to investigators now is the disclosure that Ashley Pond accused Weaver of molesting her just 5 months before her disappearance.
She was like, he tried to rape me, he tried to rape me. Do you see these scratches? She lifted up her shorts and she was showing me her inner thigh scratches. A couple of her nails actually were broken off. And having Ward be such a good guy and always friendly and like a father figure, it was hard to believe.
If a child claims to be raped I would say that child more often is telling the truth. Now, a good investigator will get to the bottom of that. Unfortunately, sometimes children fantasize. Sometimes they are led by adults to say certain things.
At the time, Ashley's mother believed her, but the police lacked hard evidence and did not pursue the case.
Weaver was one of the men that I said, look, you have to look at Weaver. I mean, he had motive, he had reason.
When folks talked to Ward Weaver, it just seemed like just an ordinary average Joe from Oregon City, single dad, raising his young daughter.
He was very cooperative, provided his alibi for where he would have been on the morning that Ashley disappeared.
It all pointed back to Weaver. He had motive, he had the opportunity. He could watch them, knows what time they get to the bus stop. You know, he sees that every day. He really paid attention and watched them. I think he planned it.
When confronted, Weaver protests, claiming he is being unjustly accused, tarnished by Ashley's lies.
You know, the people that know me, you know, my friends, my family, they're behind me, and everybody else, I don't care.
He also feels he's being persecuted because of his father's criminal past.
His father was, not only convicted of 2 murders and serving time on death row in San Quentin, but he was suspected in up to 20 other murders that are still unsolved, and that in one of the murders he was convicted of, he buried the body of the victim in his own backyard.
But the FBI cannot convict anyone based on the crimes of their parents. At the command center, agents must distinguish rumor and innuendo from fact.
All those things about his background and his father are significant to us and certainly raise his level of suspicion. It's not anything that we can put in a search warrant and use in a court of law.
We knew that he had a criminal history, that there had been some violence against women in his past.
Yet surprisingly, Weaver seems undaunted by all the police scrutiny.
Ward did not run away and hide. Ward didn't close the door. Ward opened his door to every reporter that came by.
Investigators, however, do soon discover a snag in Weaver's alibi.
He claimed from the beginning that there's no involvement on his part because he reported for his job early in the morning.
With a time card entry to prove it.
When you have a time card system that is on the honor system, where you simply fill out a time card, it's difficult to verify that he was really at work.
There is also the matter of a newly poured concrete slab. Investigators learned that just days after Ashley's disappearance, Weaver sunk a series of barrels in his backyard and covered them with dirt and cement.
His explanation was that he had bought a hot tub and it needed to have a concrete pad under it for support, and so that's why it was there.
Then, in the middle of July, a strange incident occurs that raises more eyebrows. Mariah is spending the day with Weaver's daughter Mallory when the girls go inside to fetch some popsicles from the freezer. But Weaver won't allow it.
He didn't give a reason on, why we had to go sit outside or anything. But I realized that he had added 4 extra padlocks. He had a couple of other locks on there. It was just, wrapped with chains and just all locked up. And it took him about 20 to 30 minutes to get the popsicles out.
But with little more than a mishmash of circumstantial evidence, there's not much police can do. In fact, there's still no proof that a crime has been committed at all.
We don't know the fate of children that are missing. We don't know if they're dead, and if they are, if they're at the hands of a family member or a stranger. We just don't know that.
Then, on August 13th, 2002, Everything changes when a frantic call comes into the local 911 dispatcher.
I was watching the news, and they had stated that a woman had came running out of Ward Weaver's house, naked, and she ran out in the middle of the street, trying to flag down a car.
After months of speculation, investigators finally catch a break in the case of two Oregon City girls who've been missing since earlier that year. Out of the blue, their chief suspect is accused of raping his son's girlfriend. But there's more.
Okay, what's going on? I need to tell everyone about my father, man. About what he did to those girls. What do you think he did? I know what he did. He kidnapped those girls and raped them and killed them.
My heart just dropped. All of us were just like, wow.
At that point, beyond any doubt, he had to be the guy.
Francis Weaver's 19-year-old girlfriend tells investigators that earlier in the day, she was with Ward at his home when he attacked her. Coincidentally, Sharonda Bowen was driving by Weaver's home just minutes before the crime took place.
She was standing by the car. I believe she was smoking. He did his normal wave to us as we drove by. And then the next thing you know, we're home watching the news, and he apparently had raped her.
And it was like, he did what? You had to replay it to kind of let it sink in and be like, he did that.
I mean, that was just such a crazy thing for him to have done. And that's what really showed clearly what he was capable of doing.
Police arrest Weaver for the rape of his son's girlfriend, and a judge sets bail.
The state is requesting that you set bail at this time at $1 million.
There was just a huge outcry that, he is guilty, he's the one, do something now, search the house, dig up this concrete pad in the backyard, and, let's learn the truth.
On August 24th, 2002, authorities conduct a full search of the Weaver premises.
I was dreading it. I was dreading of what they were going to find. But in the same respect, I'd know. And I wouldn't have to wonder anymore.
Search dogs are brought in to sniff out the property, and it isn't long before a backyard shed captures their attention.
The dogs had strong indication, and they went directly to one of the covered areas. My dog, she went right up to a box that was on the side of this little shed that was there, and gave just a really strong alert. And at that point, for me, it was like the world had fallen out underneath me. It just left me really speechless, and just a feeling of, I couldn't believe it. I had to go outside and sit down with the FBI agent probably for several minutes to pull myself back together and continue the search.
Crime techs waste no time examining the items in the shed, including a large, heavy microwave oven box. Inside, they find the decomposing remains of a young female.
Have discovered what appears to be human remains behind the house.
The crowd reacted as though they were shocked. It was a really visceral and emotional scene.
Just outside town, investigators break the news to family members.
The authorities showed up there, the detective and the agent, and they told us they found a body. We didn't know who they had found at that time. I remember watching Channel 2 News, and the reporter saw the truck from the morgue pull in, and her last words were, "This is not good."
Within 24 hours, the body is identified.
Oregon State Medical Examiner has positively identified the remains discovered yesterday as the body of Miranda Gaddis.
It was one of those, you don't want to believe it, because you know if you do, then the reality of it will set in. And I didn't want it to, because I wanted my sister back.
Authorities turn their attention to the recently poured slab in Weaver's backyard. Using an industrial saw to cut through the cement, they soon discover a series of 55-gallon drums filled with more concrete. But one drum has a false top, and inside, they find the body of little Ashley Pond.
Based upon information that the medical examiner provided to us, we had a sense that she may have been in the freezer for a period of time before she was moved to the actual final burial spot.
Just having spent so much time and energy and investment into this, and to have that bitter result. You know, the things that we saw that day are things that are going to stay with me for the rest of my life.
The crime was so heinous and so disturbing, and it was still shocking to know that somebody, just an ordinary person like that, is capable of that kind of violence, especially against such a young, innocent life.
After she was found and we buried her, that was my time to grieve. That was my time to, you know, absorb what had actually taken place. Because you can think about a million things what could have happened, but until you know for sure, it doesn't really sink in. And even then, I had trouble.
They had a fence around Weaver's property, and it was pretty incredible, the outpour of support. You know, that wall was just solid with stuffed bears and flowers.
I guess I'm kind of a cynic. I've seen those on the news before and always thought there was just something kind of phony about that. But I was in the area, so I went down there and talked to the parents. The missing girls were like their own kids, and they were using this as an example to teach their kids what the world is really like, and also pay tribute to these two young girls that, you know, they kind of felt they had come to know. And so I don't look at those memorials the same way anymore.
Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty. On September 22nd, 2004, Ward Weaver III is convicted of 17 charges, including aggravated murder, sexual abuse, rape, and abuse of a corpse. Sentencing is swift.
As to count one for aggravated murder, it will be you'll be sentenced to life to the Oregon Department of Corrections without the possibility of parole.
I am glad he got life without the possibility of parole, because he has every day of his life to think about what he'd done.
He's definitely a predator. Do I think he would have done it again? Sure, absolutely. I think he's right where he belongs. I think he's right where he belongs.
It was almost like he was two different people. You know, the one that we saw that was, you know, caring and supportive and wanted to be there to support us, but also the sick man that took two precious girls out of our life.
Despite his plea, Weaver has yet to reveal all the details about the murder of Ashley Pond or Miranda Gaddis.
She's still in my heart. She's in everything I do.
When I have really bad days, I come sit up here and light a candle and just talk to Miranda and Ashley as if they were still here.
I'm a mother bear. And he said, that's what I want to do, is protect my cubs. Because I always told her I'd protect her. And I wasn't able to. And that